Nothing triggers me more than a bunch of fucking retards that literally eat meat for 2 or 3 meals a day, acting like the killing of a random fucking dog is the worst fucking thing to ever happen in the history of the world. I cannot imagine what kind of a fucking, like, smooth brain fucking retard you have to be to walk out of a fucking Burger King with your fucking chicken tendies and your double fucking cheeseburger, bring up an article on your phone and fucking cry because a random fucking dog gets killed. Nothing triggers me harder than this shit. Holy fucking autism, dude.
When it comes to pointing out this hypocrisy concerning dogs and other animals, I don't have much to say here, as I don't see how one can consistently permit pig slaughterhouses while not also permitting the slaughter of dogs. So on that point, I completely agree with Destiny. However, in order to not be a meat-eating hypocrite himself, Destiny has to weigh his options carefully. For example, he could, A, recognize that both pigs and dogs possess the right to be treated with respect. After all, like us, they are individuals who care about what happens to them. And speciesism, being arbitrary and untenable like racism, cannot rationally deprive non-human animals of this right. Or B, go full Jeffrey Dahmer and support the abuse and killing of dogs and pigs for the pleasure of humans. So what does Destiny have to say?
I don't know how far, like, you take this. Like, are you really saying that it's perfectly fine to skin animals alive?
Yeah, yeah, I would. I don't think that if you are a meat eater, if you're watching this debate as a meat eater, I think it's really stupid to try and draw a distinction between, like, well, I think that it's okay to massively harvest and torture and eat tons of animals, but I don't think that, like, bullfighting or skinning animals is okay. Like, this is a bad thing. So I'm going to sit on the end of pretty much any treatment towards animals is permissible, because I don't consider them as having any of the rights that humans do, would be my point of view.
With that out of the way, the rest of this video will be devoted to addressing Destiny's response to Unnatural Vegan's take on his debate with Vegan Gains.
It's a little bit axiomatic in that I just define the fact that humans exist on a different level than animals.
Yeah.
And that gives us the right to do whatever to them. Basically, the way that I kind of draw this distinction is that animals aren't really capable of reciprocating social value the same way that people are. So, for instance, if we can have, like, a social standard of values amongst humans, I can say, you know, like, we shouldn't kill each other, we shouldn't steal from each other, et cetera, et cetera. Other humans can respect that. They can, if they're too young to, they can grow to respect it, right? They're capable of, like, intellectually recognizing that thing.
So Destiny claims that children have rights because they can, or they will, one day grow to respect the social contract. But can they all? This obviously depends on the environment that they grow up in and just what will happen to them. It requires knowledge of the future applied retroactively, which children will and which...
At this point, both Creepy Destiny...
It's not creepy at all!
...and the ableist, anti-animal rights activist Unnatural Vegan...
The only rational position with regard to ethical consideration is an ableist one.
Ramble on about potential moral agents and gloss over a serious problem for Destiny's position, a problem that I want to focus on here.
Okay, so indigenous tribes people, like, if you just so wish to, maybe you just enjoy killing people, you think it's not a moral issue to just massacre an entire island of indigenous people who just, you know, who are hostile to outsiders.
If they're not capable of reciprocating, then yeah, go for it.
Really?
It sounds really cold, but yeah.
If that's not bad enough, then consider this as well. There are humans, some being children, who will never be able to respect a social contract. According to Destiny, humans who are irreversibly and severely mentally enfeebled have no direct moral standing, so we are permitted to torture them to death for fun, just as we could with dogs.
I'm Rena Bruyant. I love dogs. Doesn't everyone? Bye.
Unnatural Vegan, being a consequentialist and an ableist, is not in a good position either, as she would be committed to supporting the torture of a dying, mentally enfeebled orphan for fun if the act were optimific.
The same may even be the case in some terrible examples of injustice, like animal testing for life-saving cures. The animals being experimented on can suffer greatly, and this is unjust. but the positive consequences of creating life-saving medicine for a much larger number of humans and alleviating human suffering and promoting well-being can be worth it.
Great job.
As a bonus, here's the one janitor supporting destiny and animal exploitation. And here's a new one. He also questions whether we have duties to people who happen to be far away.
People talk about the idea of special relationships, that is, that morality only really binds people who stand in some kind of contractual relationship with each other. But in fact, if you take that seriously as a criterion of when we have a moral relationship, then it's hard to see why we would have moral obligations to strangers, for example, or people who live across the sea from us. But yet, really, every decent person believes that we do.
But if somebody grows up and doesn't respect the social contract and starts murdering people or whatever, then yeah, we absolutely do revoke their rights, of course.
In the case of serial killer Richard Chase, he suffered from schizophrenia. He killed people because he believed Nazis and UFOs were chasing him, and he thought he needed his victim's blood to stay alive. Now, because of this, do you think he had no rights? Do you think that, after he was caught, we were permitted to torture him for fun?
Oh, wait.
Destiny would probably think that's okay as well. At best, Destiny could claim that we could only revoke some of Chase's rights, but it's not clear why we couldn't revoke all of his rights under Destiny's view.
Kill this dog.
You just think anyone should be able to like torture their dog to death?
Pretty much, yeah. Because it's a possession and you don't... I like the loaded fucking... I should just not answer any of these loaded questions. I should just say... I should just say that, like, we're talking about whether the animal should be treated as an object or not. Like, if you want to say, like, torture the dog and skin it to death, like, I mean, like... Would any normal, well-adjusted person do this? Probably not. But, like, if anybody were to ask me this question about any possession, I would say, no, that's probably a dumb idea. Like, what if I wanted to go outside and I wanted to strip from my car, piece from piece, every piece of metal, and I wanted to dissolve it in a bath of acid and destroy everybody? I would be like, well, no, that sounds pretty fucked up, dog. Like, why would you do that?
Destiny is suggesting that there is no morally relevant difference between dismembering a car and dismembering a dog. The former has no interests or desires. The latter has an interest in not suffering, like Destiny. Still, according to Destiny, a car and a dog have the exact same moral status as property.
Like, I can say that without respecting the car as like as an object that has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or some shit. Like, I don't have to respect it as a sentient creature to say that, like, it's kind of fucked up that you would go out and do that, right? Like, that's a little bit fucked up.
Just like Destiny, and unlike the car, the dog can experience life, liberty, and happiness. So why is the dog's interest in life, liberty, and happiness considered morally irrelevant, as if the dog, like the car, did not have these interests at all?
I guess, like, so I should be more careful on, like, these insane hypotheticals that are loaded with, like, emotional language, I guess.
Destiny decries emotionally loaded language in these arguments, but this is standard stuff in ethics. I'm sorry that Destiny's sensibilities are so easily offended, and that this has caused him to be so emotional throughout his response, but again, this is standard stuff in ethics. A lot of the thought experiments and problems raised utilize and resemble some of the most graphic and disturbing scenarios possible. For his emotional health, I think Destiny should probably avoid talking about ethical issues.
Yeah, of course it is, because that's my whole fundamental fucking...
There is probably not a libertarian on Earth who would starve for their ideology rather than steal a loaf of bread, no matter what they say. This all-or-nothing mentality is really a serious problem.
I'm a libertarian.
It is an inherent problem of deontology, which I talk about here. People trying to cling to a rule or dogma regardless of consequence, or the reasoning that got them there.
Unnatural Vegan is not well informed when it comes to deontology. She actually cited one of those vegan atheist forum posts as a good takedown of deontology.
And less deontologists like Gary Francione, who is a woo. All deontologists are woos because absolute deontological authority is inherently an appeal to woo. Look back to Kant on that one.
Destiny, that's false. Everyone doesn't agree that humans should be protected. The example he made was that Nazis didn't agree. Okay, but then you would ask the Nazis for their rationale, right? What are the Nazis' rationalizations for treating Jews as less than human? And if they can't provide any, then they're breaching the social contract by killing them without providing good reason for doing so, right? This is all accounted for in everything I've said.
If any of the victims of the Holocaust lacked the cognitive capacity to respect a social contract, then, other than by weakly appealing to indirect duties, Destiny cannot say that the Nazis did anything wrong by torturing and killing those individuals.
You can really see the unsavoriness of
Except my entire morality cares about the disenfranchised, because my entire morality is built around the fact that I could be a disenfranchised person. That's literally like that's like one of the central points of my person. That's why I'm an SJW libcuck now, right? Who said, what was the example brought up of the curtain? That you are going to be placed into society, but you don't know who you're going to be. And there is a curtain in front of you that you can't see beyond, and your goal is to maximize society so that if you were placed into any role in society, you would be doing optimally well. You would optimize society for as many people as possible because you could be any individual in that society. That's like the entire point of my train of thought. The veil of ignorance. How could you say that I would justify?
Many defenders and detractors of this contractarian theory have argued that it necessarily rules out non-human animals from considerations of justice, because the act of deliberating on these rules precludes non-rational beings from the original position. However, some philosophers have argued that in order for the veil of ignorance to be truly impartial and not a thin, biased piece of cloth, then not only would you not know which race, social class, or sexuality you belong to, but you also wouldn't know, under a complete veil of ignorance, what either your intellectual capabilities would be or what species you would belong to. Under this revision of the original position, both non-autonomous humans and non-human animals would have their interests considered along with autonomous humans. I take this to be a clear improvement over any contractarian theory that denies the rights of non-autonomous humans and non-human animals.
his views just by making slight adjustments to his earlier rationalization.
I'm not a tiger. I'm not concerned with the existence of tigers. I'm a human. That's what I am. I'm concerned with the existence. Oh, and now she's going to say, I'm not a poor person. I'm not a black person. I'm not concerned with the existence of black people, so I shouldn't care about black people. Here it comes. That's where she's going with this. Go ahead. Go ahead. Hit me up. Go ahead. Hit me with it. They can be concerned with my existence. This is how my moral code kind of works.
I'm not a Jew.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned with the existence of Jews. I am an Aryan.
Go
That's
full Godwin's on me.
I'm concerned with the existence of other Aryans because
thank
I know
you.
they can be concerned
I know.
with my
You
existence.
got me, dude.
That's how my moral
You got me
code
so well.
kind of works.
Good job, dude.
That felt disgusting to say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
It's just as valid
Good
to
job,
draw
dude.
an arbitrary line
Yep.
at race. If one liberty in inflicting harm against another group doesn't have to be justified, then
Good job, dude.
the
You
other
got me.
doesn't either.
A few years after calling herself a speciesist,
I talked about speciesism and why, unlike many vegans, I am a speciesist.
I'm both surprised and glad to see Unnatural Vegan offering an anti-speciesist critique of Destiny's view. For those unfamiliar with her views, she later reneged on being a speciesist and instead opted to be an ableist.
Essentially, I misunderstood the definition of speciesism, as some of you pointed out in the comment section of the original video. The only rational position with regard to ethical consideration is an ableist one.
So she traded one prejudice for another.
Great job.
By the way, how did Unnatural Vegan, an avowed vegan running a channel on veganism in the year 2015, not know the definition of speciesism? And how, as a consequentialist, did she manage to misread animal liberation and not grasp speciesism by the end of the first chapter? Anyway, as we just saw in her response to Destiny, Unnatural Vegan pointed out the arbitrary discrimination underpinning Destiny's veil of ignorance. And after watching Destiny's response, there was no substantive counter to this charge. So in trying to be charitable to him, maybe he just doesn't want to budge on an implicit view that formulating these rules presupposes some rationality. However, as philosopher Mark Rowlands argues, Quote, "The fact that it is ideally rational agents who are responsible for formulating the terms of the contract does not entail that the contract, therefore, only subsumes rational agents. Indeed, given the nature of the intuitive equality argument and the dependence of the social contract argument on the intuitive equality argument, it is clear why Rawls should reject this inference. The intuitive equality argument, in essence, runs as follows. If a property P is undeserved, then it is morally arbitrary and one is not morally entitled to it. If one is not morally entitled to P, then one is also not morally entitled to whatever benefits stem from the possession of P. However, rationality seems to be an undeserved property, if any property is. A person plays no role in deciding whether or not she is going to be rational. She either is or she is not. The decision is not hers, but nature's. Therefore, according to the terms of the intuitive equality argument, it is a morally arbitrary property, and one is not morally entitled to its possession. Therefore, also, one is not morally entitled to whatever benefits accrue from its possession. Therefore, to restrict the beneficiaries of the protection afforded by the contract to rational agents would be to contravene the intuitive equality argument. But it is the results of this argument which, in large part, determine the description of the original position, and hence the principles we derive from the original position. Therefore, it is a restriction we cannot legitimately apply." End quote. For anyone interested, I'll leave a link to this paper in the video description. I'd also recommend the chapter on reciprocity in Daniel Dombrowski's book, Babies and Beasts. Anyway, the original position only presupposes rationality in formulating the rules. It does not presuppose or entail that the rules cannot apply to non-rational beings. One should not, as Destiny and other speciesists are prone to doing, arbitrarily exclude non-rational beings. That being the case, both mentally enfeebled humans and non-human animals would have to be considered in the original position. And this is not to say that they would have duties according to a social contract, but rather it's to say that they may have rights or that we may have duties to them grounded in a social contract. Destiny even seems to hint at this. Granted, while he initially said people in the following quote, he also appears to suggest something more inclusive with another term.
Was the example brought up of the curtain that you are going to be placed into society, but you don't know who you're going to be, and there is a curtain in front of you that you can't see beyond, and your goal is to maximize society so that if you were placed into any role in society, you would be doing optimally well. You would optimize society for as many people as possible because you could be any individual in that society. Because you could be any individual in that society.
So why would the individual have to be rational or human? Mentally enfeebled humans and non-human animals are individuals in our society. They have interests they would rather fulfill than frustrate. What happens to them matters to them, and if you were one of them, you would not want to be tortured to death. Behind a thin, still biased veil of ignorance, Destiny's unfair exclusion of them from the original position can be attributed to his ignorance. His ethical theory, as it stands now, excludes both severely mentally enfeebled people and non-human animals. If he changes his theory to include severely mentally enfeebled people as those with direct moral standing, it's not clear how he could not also ascribe direct moral standing to non-human animals. So beyond the talk about contractarianism, we have a problem here. If Destiny was speaking honestly when he said it is permissible to torture dogs for fun, then he's as well-adjusted as Jeffrey Dahmer. If he was speaking dishonestly, then he cowardly avoided examining his own beliefs and assumptions.
Rights can only be negotiated with power, and no system based purely in social contract cares at all about the disenfranchised.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.